Hello and welcome to the Data Privacy Lawyer. My name is Funmi Owolabi and I'm the principal attorney at the firm. Today's review, we're going to be looking at privacy. We look at privacy every time. Okay, let's talk about tone and display. There is a term in the data protection space called a layered notice. I like this review today because many of the reviews that I do are privacy notices that are just displayed on one plain web page. More commonly, we don't have the opportunity to open each section. Now, something I want to talk about is I really enjoy the frequently asked questions, and I really enjoy how the questions are formulated here because I think that they address the audience. I'm pretty sure about a third of the reviews I've done, I've talked about how addressing your audience is also a privacy consideration for you, and I'll explain why. If a regulator was ever to look at your privacy notice and start looking at your privacy documentation, one of the questions they're going to ask is, does the document you are displaying to your consumers or data subjects, are they going to be able to understand what you're saying? There have been times, and let me tell you a bit about my practice, I don't just draft privacy notices, I draft all sorts of privacy documentation for clients. There are privacy documents that I draft and create that are for a legal audience. Other lawyers are going to read this document, so the tone is different. For the privacy notices and cookie notices that I draft, I think about who the consumers are that are accessing a specific product, tool, or website, and I will draft the notice based on that audience. The audience of lawyers that will read some of the documents I've created, the tone is not going to be very simple. It's going to be very tight and based on what the laws require. And I also had mentioned the layering. Many consumers don't necessarily go on a web page and read the privacy policy. This is something that I think privacy counsel do. In my own personal circles, we talk about privacy notices and policies, and we talk about ones that we like, okay? So personally, I think that this is generally read by other privacy lawyers and drafted because we're the ones that create these, and we're the ones that, we see a myriad of these, on a daily basis. So when a business is considering drafting one of these, look at who your audience is, right? The audience potentially here are people that buy a Tide product, an Oral-B product, and a Pampers, right? Somebody that is a mother that is buying Pampers, are they going to understand legal jargon? Probably not, right? So you have to draft your notices to address the consumers. And I always ask clients, and I have a whole intake form, I say, can you give me insight into who the individuals are that interact with your company? Now notice that I didn't say who are your customers. I said who is interacting with your organization, because although you have a customer audience, at times you may have an employee audience too, and you need to draft language that accommodates an employee audience. Sometimes you'll have vendors and partners too, right? A vendor and partner, there is a understanding that they may have related to certain provisions that you need to tailor your notices for. So let's get back to what I like a lot about this. It's layered in that we've got very simple questions. Do we sell your personal data for monetary compensation? I truly believe that most people would understand what this means, okay? And we've got a no answer. It's very simple to read. It's very easy to read. And I personally believe that if a mother, for example, that bought Pampers wanted to understand how her personal data was being used, this FAQ is something that she would understand. Now, the other value that I see for businesses is adding definitions. And even in documents that are addressing a legal audience, I add definitions because sometimes the definition may change. And I'll give you an example. What's considered sensitive personal data in the United States is often much more broad than what is considered a special category of personal data in the European Union. And many US states have expanded what constitutes sensitive data, and that is a consideration a business needs to have when drafting a notice if they're processing those elements, right? And also, what are the responsibilities associated with processing that type of data as well? So I like this already. I think that the sentences are very easy to understand. And let's just open these all up. Okay, great. Okay, this is fantastic. Let me tell you why. How you control your personal data. And we've got some different groups of individuals and data subjects. And I'm actually going to open a couple of them. And I had talked about during this review how the groups of data subjects influence the provisions that exist within a privacy notice. Most times it's impossible to capture every single privacy or processing activity that a business does on one notice. And we can see here that they've got some dental professionals, healthcare professionals, consumer research participants, right? None of these addresses those that are buying Pampers. You notice that? Now, I don't know if any of these groups are going to buy the Pampers, but what I can say is that there's going to be a level of control that a consumer has with respect to their personal data. And then also we've got here dental professionals, right? If you are a dental professional and have provided your personal data to us, there's different capacities that each data subject is going to be providing their personal data. And with collecting that, there are certain responsibilities. Let's go to the regular data subject requests. Actually, let's make another note here. We've got US state privacy laws, and then we've got European Economic Area, Switzerland, UK, and Serbia. So I've mentioned a number of times about how many companies don't really articulate the geographies where they process personal data. But in 2026, I'm beginning to see more and more organizations actually dictate the geographies. And I think that that is a wise choice. Why? Because each data protection law has its own rules on what a company can do. And the rules are ever growing. Just in the United States, we have over 20 of our states that have US state-specific privacy legislation. So if you are a business and you are processing personal data in all those states, your consideration is not limited to where you're headquartered. You need to take into consideration whether you meet the thresholds in those states and then maintain your compliance based on what those laws dictate. All right, I've not spent much time talking about legal basis in a long time. Many of my 2025 reviews talked about legal basis, but if you're interested in that, take a look at some of my older videos. Legal basis. Okay, let's talk first about legal basis from a geographical perspective. Some countries do not have or do not require businesses to have a legal basis. Many do, some do not. So an activity you can conduct in one country with no legal basis may require a legal basis in another country. If you are interested in what legal basis means, how it applies to your business, take a look at my description below. I don't think a 10-minute YouTube video is going to do justice on what is required from a legal basis perspective. But what you can know from this discussion is that if a legal basis is required in a certain geography, it's really important for businesses to list all of their processing activities. What is my processing activity for my customer? What is my processing activity for a healthcare worker? What is my processing activity for children's data, right? And when you have articulated all of your activities, then you can go down your list of processing activities and identify what legal basis you're relying on in order to process the personal data. All right, I really hope you enjoyed this review. I really like looking at privacy notices. I know many of my privacy colleagues and counterparts also enjoyed reviewing these. And I guess it's just educational for businesses because we see this in our work and our practice. And I really enjoy drafting these. I like talking to clients about, insights that they never really considered about their privacy notices. So I hope you enjoyed this review. If you have comments about what I've stated, leave them below and I will see you in another review.